Welcome to This Explainer. Historically, when we investigated air pollution damaging vegetation, we almost always pointed our fingers at one main culprit, sulfur dioxide. But our industrial landscape has completely transformed since then. With the explosion of complex modern pesticides and highly advanced industrial processes, the sheer range of harmful pollutants has absolutely skyrocketed. Today, we're facing a massive, incredibly complex array of industrial chemicals that interact directly with the delicate biology of plants. So let's dive into a bit of an anatomical journey to see exactly how this invisible threat actually operates. Here is our roadmap for today's session. We're going to cover the scale of air pollution, anatomy and gas exchange, environmental vulnerability factors, diagnosing visible damage, classifying injury types, and we'll wrap up with specific chemical pollutants and their effects. Section 1. The scale of pollution and just how far these pollutants can reach. 150 kilometers. Just let that sink in for a second. This figure totally shatters the myth that pollution only affects the immediate area right around a factory. Vegetation over 150 kilometers away from a pollutant source has been found severely damaged. In some extreme cases, heavy smelting operations have literally caused the complete destruction of vegetation over vast areas. The physical scale of this threat is just staggering. Section 2. Anatomy and gas exchange. Let's take a look inside the leaf. To really grasp how distant emissions can kill a plant, we have to understand its internal structure. The leaf tissue is arranged in very distinct layers. Right on the top and bottom, you've got the epidermis, which acts as a protective skin barrier. But sandwiched between those layers, that's the engine room of the plant. It's made up of the palisade and spongy parenchyma cells, and that is exactly where sunlight is converted into life-sustaining energy. Now, to support this engine room, the leaf relies on a network of denser structures called veins, which are all interconnected down to the stem. It helps to think of these exactly like blood vessels in animals. Just as our vessels transport oxygen and nutrients to our vital organs, leaf veins act as the absolute essential transport system for moving water and food throughout the entire plant. But for this photosynthetic engine to actually run, it has to take in carbon dioxide. On the bottom of the leaf, there are these microscopic entrances called stomata, which are opened and closed by pairs of specialized guard cells. And here's the catch. This mechanism acts as a total Trojan horse. The very gateways that were beautifully designed by nature to welcome life-giving carbon dioxide are hijacked by toxic gases like sulfur dioxide, allowing pollutants to completely bypass that protective epidermis skin. Section 3. Environmental factors. And what triggers plant vulnerability? Knowing that pollutants enter through those microscopic stomata, it naturally begs the question, when are plants actually most vulnerable to absorbing these harmful chemicals? It's not a constant state at all. It fluctuates dramatically based on the weather and the plant's immediate environment. The degree to which stomata open dictates how much gas they absorb, and herein lies a massive biological paradox. The exact conditions that maximize the absorption of carbon dioxide for healthy photosynthesis are the very same conditions that predispose the plant to maximum injury from pollution. When light intensity and relative humidity are high, the roots have adequate moisture, and temperatures are moderate, those stomata open wide. In perfect growing conditions, the plant is, ironically, at its most vulnerable. Conversely, most plants exhibit a natural resistance that's perfectly tied to the solar cycle. At night, without the sunlight required for photosynthesis, plants tightly shut their stomata. Because the doors are closed and locked, plants become highly resistant to air pollution during the nighttime compared to the middle of the day. Section 4. Diagnosing visible damage. How do we spot the symptoms? When botanists assess a site, they look for specific forms of damage. The first major indicator is necrosis. Necrosis is simply defined as the killing or the complete collapse of plant tissue. When the toxic load from pollutants becomes too much for the plant to handle, the cellular structure breaks down entirely, resulting in dead, lifeless areas on the leaf. Notice the distinct necrotic patterns that appear. You'll see these stark, brown, crispy patches, which represent the exact areas where the cells have completely died and collapsed. The functional tissue in these spots has been entirely destroyed, rendering that specific portion of the leaf completely useless for photosynthesis. A second major symptom we look for is chlorosis. This is the loss or severe reduction of chlorophyll, which is that vital green pigment completely necessary for a plant's survival. In the academic world, chlorosis in plants is considered directly analogous to anemia in animals. Just as an anemic animal lacks healthy red blood cells, a chlorotic plant lacks the essential green pigment it needs to generate energy. Out in the field, chlorosis presents as these pale green and distinctly yellow patterns spreading across the leaves. This is a huge red flag. It often indicates a deficiency in necessary nutrients, directly caused by the chemical interference of the pollutants. The plant is essentially being starved of its ability to feed itself, which leads to this bleached, sickly appearance. Another wildly fascinating, though completely destructive symptom is epinasty. This shows up as a pronounced downward curvature of the leaf. This curling happens because pollutants cause an irregular, accelerated growth rate on the upper surface compared to the bottom, physically warping the entire structure. Alongside epinasty, severely stressed plants might also suffer from abscission. That's a fancy term for the premature dropping of their leaves entirely. Section 5. Classifying injury types. Let's compare acute and chronic damage. Plant damage is generally divided into two main categories, basically boiling down to dose and time. Acute injury results from short-term exposure to high concentrations of a pollutant. Think of a sudden, massive industrial fumigation event. The effects are incredibly rapid, appearing within hours or days as severe necrotic cell collapse. Chronic injury, on the other hand, results from long-term low-level exposure. This slow poisoning induces the gradual chlorosis or leaf abscission we were just talking about. But there is a third category, and honestly, it's perhaps the most insidious because it is completely invisible. We call it growth or yield retardation. In this scenario, pollution silently suppresses the plant's overall growth and agricultural output without leaving any visible markings or burns on the leaves whatsoever. The farmer simply harvests less crop at the end of the season, often without ever realizing that ambient air pollution was the silent culprit the whole time. Section 6. Specific pollutants and their unique chemical calling cards. Different pollutants actually leave highly specific chemical signatures on the plants they attack. Sulfur dioxide, for instance, typically causes interveinal chlorotic bleaching, or even leaves the foliage completely skeletonized in severe cases. Ozone exposure can leave tiny, distinct flecks or trigger total leaf collapse. Fluorides uniquely cause a cumulative necrosis right at the very tip of the leaf, while a pollutant like pan specifically targets young leaves, causing a strange bronzing effect on their lower surface. Ultimately, the visual symptoms dictate the source. We've seen the staggering geographic scale, the microscopic vulnerabilities, and the stark visual evidence of air pollution on plant life. These aren't just abstract chemical reactions happening in a vacuum. They are direct assaults on the biological engines that feed our entire planet. Understanding these anatomical vulnerabilities is absolutely the critical first step. So I'll leave you with this thought. As industrial processes continue to multiply globally, how can we better protect the delicate botanical mechanisms that sustain our world? Thank you so much for engaging with this explainer.